I am continuing to talk about mindfulness and how it can be helpful with people with avoidant personality disorder. Again, what mindfulness is focused concentration on some physical thing that you can discern with your current senses that is not something that you're thinking about that happened in the past or something in the future that you might be wondering about, but it's something that you can really focus on right now. And the point of that is to be used as a distraction technique to reset your thinking so that you're not caught up in some thought cycle. And the second thing that mindfulness is really good for is to train you to be able to focus which thoughts are important to you and to actually be able to sort through them and pick out which one you want to think about. And that's what I'm going to talk about more right now. But first, okay, this is kind of hokey, but I'm going to give you a chance to practice a mindfulness yourself, to actually look at what the screen is showing you, or to actually focus on something in your own real life that you're experiencing at the moment for just a few seconds. So go ahead and practice now. The practicing is integral if you take actual mindfulness classes or sessions, and they're usually much longer and seemingly more painful. I did mine in basically a conference room, so there was nothing to look at, and it would be a minimum of 2 minutes. And it's not really meditation, because meditation, you're not supposed to think about anything. With mindfulness, you're supposed to focus on some actual sense of yours, which is sight, sound, touch, smell, or taste. And when you do it, what you should choose to focus on is something you don't interact with. So, for instance, if you are thinking about the taste of something that you had just drank, unless it's like an alcohol situation, because then you're being affected, that means you are interacting with it. But like, say you had a cup of coffee or something and you can still taste it in your mouth, that's actually a really good one, because if you spend any amount of time thinking about it, you'll be able to discern that there is a change in whatever, either the taste completely changes or it becomes lessened or something like that. But if you have something, say, in your mouth, like a cough drop or something, that would not work, because I mean, I suppose it could work, but it's just not nearly as effective for shutting down the parts of your brain that's overthinking, because you're actually interacting with it. It's actually in your mouth at that time. You could, move it around with your tongue or whatever, and you could feel like if the taste of it was suddenly so intense because you're paying attention to it that you wanted to move it, then you'd be focused on, will I move it or will I not move it, and stuff like that. So that's why, anyway, I'm sort of repeating myself, but that is what mindfulness is. You've got to repeat it. I thought it was just recently that I did all this work on it, but I did my most focused work on it 9 years ago. It's taken a long time, and it's not like I do it all the time either. Again, I do it as like emergency stopgate type thing. There are some people that do mindfulness with everything, and I don't know. For me, it's most effective to just have as an emergency tool that if I need it, I've got it, I can do it and get through some, super anxiety provoking incident, and use that as my tool. But it took a long time, and it took a long time to truly grasp it. And it's going to sound really weird and ironic, but it was basically when I stopped focusing on it as a practice of this is what I need to do, and as a tool of this is how it's supposed to work, and didn't really pay much attention to there's this thing out there. That's when I sort of calmed down about it, and it actually started working for me. And anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is really specific for people who overthink. So people with avoidant personality disorder, basically. And it's not mindfulness per se, but it is using the lessons that you learn from mindfulness in order to affect your thinking process going forward. And I talked about it yesterday, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this. I push back like you wouldn't believe. I mean, first of all, I thought, mindfulness, that's some hokey, hippie thing. Give me a break. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for everybody. But it works more often than not, especially when you're not trying to force it. And especially when you have a reason to do it. If you're just like, oh, just be mindful, then there's no point. But if you have a focused reason to use the mindfulness as a coping technique in specific cases in your life, can be really great. And one of the things is, again, to learn how to filter your thoughts, to pick the ones to pay attention to and let the other ones go. And that sounds great. Don't we all wish that we could take these negative thoughts that are driving us crazy and just go poof, you're gone. And how to do it, again, it's going to sound really counterintuitive. I'm going to try to break this down. This is what you need to do. Even trying to say it out loud, first of all, it breaks my brain because this should not work and it should not happen. And it sounds way too simplistic. And it sounds like I'm just being really glib. I'm not being glib. This is really possible. Basically, some thought pops into your head. Like if you did the exercise I did yesterday where I was trying to explain to you or have you focus on all the different types of thoughts that can pop into your head when you're quote-unquote trying to be mindful, which is fine. Again, that alone can be effective, because if you're focusing on trying to focus and, how you're thinking about X, Y, and Z instead of what you're supposed to be focusing on, you're still not thinking about the thing that you were ruminating on. So you're still going to get a benefit. Even, just thinking about anything else and breaking that cycle can be really effective. So, but again, what I was hoping that you were focusing on was that you may have had 6, 7, 8, 3 dozen thoughts that you were quote unquote not supposed to be thinking, and you jumped back to what you were supposed to be thinking about and focused on that, and you just sort of forgot about the other things. You didn't, it's really hard to keep multiple thoughts in your head. And a lot of people try to push out thoughts and say, okay, I'm not going to think about this. Well, that does not work. With just about anything else, the best thing to do is to substitute something else. That's why the mindfulness can come in handy, because if you're having some ruminating thought about something, and you just can't get it out of your head, instead of saying, I'm not going to think about this anymore, mindfulness, focused attention to some physical thing in and around you at that moment, and really focus on it, will stop you from thinking about the other thing because you can only think of one thing at once. Okay? So that's why practicing mindfulness can help with these ruminating thoughts. But basically, what your goal to get to is that you don't need to do a formal stop everything mindfulness session. The goal is to let the thought in and then let it out. And the way to do that is to not try to keep it from coming and say, I'm not going to think that, I'm not going to think that, I'm not going to think that. Because then it'll be on the periphery and you're still going to be thinking about it even if you're not thinking about it. And I sound like a Lemony Snicket book, but I think you know what I'm talking about here. That, if you're trying to push a thought away and not allow it to pop into your head, it's still going to affect you, even if you don't sit and think about it. So don't try to not let a thought come. Because again, if all of a sudden you're thinking, are those geese? Yes, there are. I don't even know if you can hear it. I might be making nonsense with that. But yes, there are geese. You can hear them behind me. You can not hear what I'm saying because you're trying to think, don't think about the geese, don't think about the geese, don't think about the geese. Do you see what I mean? Or you can just okay, there's the thought, let it in, but then let it go just as quickly. So just because a thought pops into your head, it might trigger something, it might remind you of something, it might seem like it's a huge, massive thing, but that doesn't mean that you have to pay attention to it right at that moment. So, for instance, if you're looking at this picture, how about you start counting the different shades of green you can see? Eye scanning can probably see 30, 35 different shades of green. I probably sound like a maniac, like I'm going all over the place with how I'm describing this, because it is really, really difficult. If it was easy, then everybody would know all about this already. But if you look out there and you see all these different shades of green, you're not keeping in your mind the first shade of green that you looked at and keeping that in the forefront. Because if you did, you wouldn't be able to see the other shades of green out there. You saw a shade of green, sort of acknowledged it in order to make a quick snap of how many different colors of green there are, and set that aside and moved on to the next one. You didn't keep it in your head. And you might have a really terrible, bad thing that you're coping with. I had one last week. It was very bad. And it didn't make sense. And I couldn't stop thinking about it all the time. Because it was basically like this huge paradox in my life. And it was absolutely, it was making me feel terrible. And, it was like sort of a self-fulfilling type situation, that was making me feel much worse than I actually felt because I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I'm not saying this is perfect or easy or you'll be able to get this and understand it and never have this problem again. But it starts with little things. And if you can get a thought out of your head quicker, then that means your recovery will be quicker. So you literally let it in. Don't try to push it away. Don't try to ignore it. Acknowledge it. Okay, yeah, there's thought. And then let it go. So it's like having two open doors and somebody walks in the room and they keep on walking and then they walk out again. Or you're driving down the street and here comes a car and you keep driving and they keep driving and then they're past you and it's gone. And I know that sounds simplistic and impossible, but mindfulness can help you do that. because if you have a thought that you're not interested in having, is harmful, is unhelpful, is inaccurate, it's just, not the type of thing you want to be spending your time thinking about, then if it pops into your head and you can't just let it go again, then if you practice mindfulness again, you will be able to focus your attention on something else long enough for the first thought that you didn't want to lose its grip. And also, again, the more you practice mindfulness and focus on one thing, like I'm sitting on this log right here, and I can feel the coolness of the log through my butt. I mean, that's basic. But that's the type of thing. If you can focus on that one thing, out of all of this, all these things I could be looking at, I'm listening to the wind, I'm hearing the water. And those are just the three senses right there. So I'm going to focus on that one thing, maybe because it's kind of uncomfortable. Kind of uncomfortable does not mean that you can't use it for mindfulness. If it's painful, okay, then that doesn't work. But if it's kind of uncomfortable, then it's easy to focus on it because it's kind of uncomfortable. Learning how to focus on one thing will help you, focus your thoughts as well, and to sort through them and make a hierarchy and decide, okay, this is an important thought that I want to think about. Important does not mean it's on a to-do list. Important could be, I'm thinking about somebody I know who's maybe having a good time right now, and I want to think about them having a good time. That's important to you. It doesn't necessarily mean, and it could also be, I need to go to the grocery store and I need to buy this, this, and this, and ignore all the people that are freaking out right now about what they might want. That, I've got to keep my focus when I go to the grocery store and get what I want to get. That's the same type of thing too. So you can do that with all these random thoughts that pop into your head. You can sort through them and focus on the ones you want, and more importantly, let the ones that you're not interested in go away. Just like that water down there, it's sliding away. So you can't decide, I'm going to look at that one wave and focus on that one wave because it's gone. And that's what you can let your thoughts do. Just slide away that way. So this is kind of rambly and all over the place, and I'm sorry about that. And I wish I could just snap my fingers and say, this is how you do it. But how you do it is being aware and paying attention and practicing and understanding it will take a long time to learn how to do that. But give it a chance. So I think that's a good place to stop. I suppose if you have questions, if I'm not making any sense, the problem with it is if you go to a mindfulness class, the people who are teaching it know what they're talking about, and they talk with their lingo, and they're just like, it's so simple, you just do this. And you sit there going, what? And I'm kind of in that place. I'm not an expert by any means, but I know what I'm talking about. And so it's really hard to describe it to somebody who doesn't know anything about it at all. Or maybe has never thought about it in this way. So if you're starting from zero and I'm saying, here I am over at the goal line, it's really hard for me to sort of get the details that can get you started. So if there's questions about what I'm talking about, if I'm not making sense, if it's not clear, please let me know. But again, that is the end goal for people with avoidant personality disorder, is to be able to use mindfulness as sort of the template on how to focus your thoughts better and to sort of tune down, because you won't be able to turn them completely off, but lessen the impact of the negative thoughts and ruminations, and just don't listen to them as much, don't give them as much mind, don't make them as important as they think they need to be, and instead free your mind up to think different thoughts that can give you a little bit more peace.